open the Selectmen's meeting for February 21st, 2023. We will be going into executive session and returning to open session no later than 6 o'clock.
Madam Chair, can I make a motion?
Make a motion.
Yes. I'd like to make a motion that we enter executive session for two reasons. A, pursuant to General Law Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations for all non-union personnel with employment agreements. That is the Finance Director, Chief of Police, Fire Chief, and Town Administrator. And B, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss with respect to collective bargaining for all town unions, and the chair has determined that open session would have a detrimental effect on the town's bargaining position, and it pertains to the Harwich Employees Association, HEA.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You gotta do a roll call, don't you?
Do a roll call. Okay, Larry?
We don't, because there's no one on.
There's nobody on.
Oh, all right,
No,
okay.
you still have to go through that
We
process.
do? Okay.
Will do. Okay, Larry.
Okay, yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Julie, and I'm an aye. 4-0, Joe.
We'll be back.
We'll be back. I did not print the committee list. Is it in there?
Oh.
Is the committee list in there? First, 2023, we went into executive session at 5 o'clock for 2 items. On the second one, we did come to an agreement on the contract for the Harwich Employees Association. We have a 3-year agreement that will be signed tonight. If everyone would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do we have anyone for public comment?
Good evening, Kevin Considine, Deputy Chief. Proud this year to announce that we have our Polar Plunge coming up again on March 18th at 11 a.m. at Red River Beach. I sit on the Leadership Council for the Law Enforcement Torch Run for Special Olympics up in Marlboro. And the Law Enforcement Torch Run program raises funds and awareness for those with intellectual disabilities and participate in sports in the Special Olympics. So last year in Massachusetts, our group and all these police officers in Massachusetts raised nearly $400,000 for Special Olympics Massachusetts. Last year, internationally, in the United States, $42 million. And since its inception in 1981, police officers has raised nearly $1 billion for Special Olympics Massachusetts. So proud to bring this event and other events to Harwich, to showcase Harwich. And just asking for, if anybody wants to come down, you can be like Julie last year and hold our towels and not jump in the water. There are such things as towel holders. But if you're brave enough, it's the day after St. Patrick's Day. You can get in that cold water. But if you don't want to just come down and enjoy the time, last year we raised nearly $30,000, and we're hoping for the same this year. So again, it's March 18th, 11 a.m. at Red River Beach.
Thank you. It was a great day last year.
If I could get my iron up, maybe I'll jump in.
Good evening, I'm Ginny Hewitt from Brooks Free Library. I just wanted to remind the public that the Clams Consortium will be upgraded this weekend. So starting on Friday at noontime, we'll be using an offline circulation module while the data is being migrated. And that means patrons can check items out if they have their library card with them. We won't be able to check items in or place holds or anything like that, but you'll still be able to check things out. And so the system will go live on Monday, the 27th. I wanted to make sure to let patrons know that their password or PIN for the Clams catalog is not being migrated, so that they are changing the system to put a default password in of the last 4 digits of your phone number in the patron record. If you guess wrong on what phone number's on there, There is an option to have it send the reset to your email. So what we're asking people to do, people who run into trouble can always call us, but you're going to have to wait till we're open. But if you can't wait to get access, if you check if your phone number in your record and your email address are correct, and you can give us a call to do that. It's 508-430-7562, option 1 for circulation. So once you log in, you'll be able to reset your password to anything, not keep the default password. So you can do that anytime after the initial login. I wanted to mention one other thing about the new system, and we haven't talked about it a lot, but it has to do with the way that holds are filled. So when there's a waiting list on a bestseller or a popular item, the system does fill the holds in the order they were placed, kind of. There's a little wrinkle in there, and that is that when a patron returns like a bestseller that we own and we check it in, so the system's going to assign it to the next patron on the list, but if it's our item, it will assign it to the next Brooks Free Library patron on the list. So that makes sense. The library that purchased it, it's available sooner for their patrons. But the current system doesn't really do that. It prioritizes by pickup location. And so you could have a Dennis card or a Yarmouth Library card, and if you're a regular user and you're picking up at Brooks Free Library, you'll still get priority on our holds. And that kind of confuses the system a little bit, or confuses our statistics on who are really our patrons, So, so the new system will fix that. An item that's being checked in will go out to the Brooks Free Library patron. And so how is that decided? It's going to be, you'll have your library name on the library name should be on your clams card. Most people don't look at that anymore, but your library card also has a 13-digit barcode, and that starts with 10109 if you're a Brooks Free Library patron. And so in order to receive priority on the holds, you need to have our library card. So you don't need to be a Harwich resident to have a Brooks Free Library card, but you really should have the card of the library that you're using regularly. If you live out of town or work out of town, you may choose to have a Snow Library card. That's where it's going to prioritize whoever card you have. And you can find that out by checking with the library, probably next week is a good time. So take a little adjustment as we implement this, but it will fix a long-standing issue, and the system will work the way it always should have. And why would you want to have a Brooks Free Library card? Why is that better, I would say? It's better. We think it's better because we're one of the larger libraries in Clams, and so we have a larger budget, and we purchase more bestsellers, and we purchase more genres and broader collection, especially in nonfiction, than a lot of the smaller libraries have. So we have more depth, I would say, to the collection, as well as more copies of bestsellers. So if you regularly use Brooks, but you don't have our card, you're going to be waiting an awfully long time for your items. They don't go out to other libraries' patrons until after all of our patrons' holds are filled, so you could wait a long time. We also want people to have our card so they can take advantage of all the electronic resources that we have, like the access to the Cape Cod Times and the Wall Street Journal and things like that some of the smaller libraries wouldn't have. So I guess I would say, to summarize, check your library card to see if your barcode starts with 10109. Here it is. And if you don't have one, we'd be happy to edit your record and give you a new card to make you our patron. And then I just wanted to mention a couple other things happening this week. We have, we're in the middle of school vacation week, so tomorrow is Art Day for kids, and there'll be all kinds of art supplies out, and that's pretty much all day. It's a drop-in program. On Thursday, there's outdoor story time, and the interactive movie, The Lion King, where the kids can make noises and actions and stuff to go along with the movie. It's not a be quiet and watch the movie. On Friday, it's Lego Day all day, and on Saturday, we have a magic show with Ed Popolazic at 2 o'clock, and, 2:30, but free tickets given out starting at 2. And then for adults, I wanted to mention the Friends of Brooks Free Library have a first Sunday series that goes on from October to June. And so the next Sunday program is March 5th. It's C.L. Fornari. She's the garden lady. And that program's at 2. And on Sunday, April 2nd, is a musical performance with Jack and Oriana. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Hi, Hi, Carolyn Carey, Community Center Director, and I just wanted to let you know that tomorrow we're going duck hunting. Find the ducks starting at 8 a.m. Now, are the ducks going to be out earlier? No. Just kidding, they are. We have 10 ducks and at least 20 decoys. So, there's a wanted poster when you walk in. Those are the ducks you're going to be looking for. You stop in at the front desk and get your Duck Hunter official pin to start the program. We go until they're all found. Please find them. No, I'm kidding. So that is tomorrow. I would invite you all to, at some point during this week, please stop by the community center. We have our ducks on display, and there were 50 ducks turned in, and they are extraordinary. They're beautiful. And everyone can vote. You can vote one time. We have the forms at the front desk, but you really should come by and see how great they are. And then on Thursday, we are doing our indoor yard sale from 10 until 4 at the community center. Should be a fun time. And then on Friday, we will be awarding the winners of the duck contest. Whew, I think that's it.
Thank you, Carolyn. It all sounds just ducky.
I'm gonna duck out.
Anyone else for public comment? Then I will read the committee vacancies. We have agriculture, capital outlay, community center facilities, conservation, forest, accessibility rights, culture, energy and climate action, housing, historic district, planning board, real estate and open space, treasure chest, voter information, youth services, and zoning board of appeals. And as always, if your favorite committee isn't mentioned, you can apply anyways and you'll be on file. Joe, were you taking B? Azalea Drive Bridge?
Oh, thank you, yes. So beginning next week, we've been made aware by the Mass Department of Transportation that they're going to begin work that we've been anticipating for a few years now. It is in the Pleasant Lake Village part of the town on Azalea Drive, and the project is the replacement of the Azalea Drive Bridge over Herring River. They will begin on Monday, February 27th, and work will generally progress from Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. And this project is expected to begin in February and go all the way through the first week in October. And so again, this is Pleasant Lake, Azalea Drive, and specifically the bridge that goes over the Herring River. And so residents are made aware of that, and if anybody has any questions, we have contact information in administration where we can contact Mass DOT directly. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. Don? Take the consent agenda.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we approve the two selectmen's minutes for the meetings of January 30th, 2023, and for the meeting at February 6th, 2023.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, Joe.
Thank you.
New business. I'll take a motion on A. Don't all jump at once.
You guys are the committee.
No, I'll do it. You want to do it? I move that we approve the following committee appointment recommendations from the Board of Selectmen Interview Committee. 1, Alexa Page for Harwich Accessibility Rights Committee, HARC, full member, term to expire 6/30/25. Alan Peterson, Planning Board, alternate member, term to expire 6/30/23. Jean Bulger, Treasure Chest Committee, alternate member, term to expire 6/30/2024. And Glenn, I'm going to butcher the name, but Mimic, Harwich representative to Cape and Vineyard Electric Cooperative, CVEC, term to expire 6/30/2025.
Second.
Okay, yes, Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question to either of the members of the interview committee. The CVEC number for expiration, is that a solid number? Because it's not on our schedule at all. It's based on what CVEC's terms are.
I believe it's the correct number.
I think it's correct number. I think Alan reviewed it, so we can,
Yeah. We can double check
we
with,
can double check it, but Alan's pretty
Yeah, I'd
consistent.
appreciate it if you would, because I can't believe that it would be a stroke of luck that it just happens to expire at the same point all of our other committees do.
yeah, we'll check on that.
Can we approve it
I'm-
and then
I'm fine
correct
with
it if necessary?
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
4-0, Joe? And are you going to start the item B, Joe?
I certainly can, and I apologize, I didn't say it my usual as I do, but good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, everyone assembled here, and those watching at home. We're joined this evening by representatives of the Cape Cod Water Resources Restoration Project, as well as representatives from the USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture. Staff and I met with representatives regarding this restoration project, and there's some great information coming forward on some projects we may be able to partner with. And at this point, I'd turn it over to Mark Forrest, who chairs the Restoration Project program.
Thanks. Can we sit at the table?
Of course you can.
I'm going to invite Martha, Craig, and Steve. Can you grab a chair, Steve, and join us? Thank you. So what I'd like to do before we begin is I'm going to just give you a couple of handouts, just what you need, right? More reading material.
We love reading material.
You could take some of ours.
Yeah, the first thing that I'm going to give you is a fact sheet regarding our overall program. So rather than us go through a PowerPoint and go through all the details of what we do, we're going to get some of the highlights, and then you'll have this reading material to read at your pleasure.
Thanks, Mark.
And then I also have a press release, and from our last award of funding, $42 million. So, as you all know, I started my career in Harwich, working in the basement of Town Hall under the mentorship of John Bucky Griffin. And my job was to secure grant money for the town of Harwich. And all I can say is I haven't stopped seeking funds and bringing funds to the Cape. So I'm joined with Martha Craig. She's with the Cape Cod Conservation District. She is our Water Resources Restoration Project Manager. And I'm with Stephen Spear. Steve is with the NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. They're the arm of the USDA. And together, the district and the NRCS have partnered to develop this initiative, which provides resources to towns all throughout Cape Cod to essentially enhance and improve our coastal resources. So we're here tonight basically just to tell you a little bit about what we do. We're going to give you the brief version, okay? We just have a few slides. And the brief version essentially is this. As I've mentioned, we're partners. We've partnered back almost 30 years working on this comprehensive plan. It was approved by the Congress in 2006. Back then, I worked for then Congressman Bill Delahunt, and Congressman Delahunt was involved in shepherding this initiative through the appropriate approvals in the Congress. When the congressman retired, I came back, joined the Conservation District Board of Supervisors, eventually became the chairman, and have been working on this initiative from that vantage point. So as you know, I wear multiple hats, and this is a labor of love for me. It's an unpaid position, and my job is basically to advocate at the federal level for funding for this initiative. Now, when it was approved in 2006, this fact sheet basically reflects the original program and the original amount of funding. Since then, and over the past couple of years, we've actually updated the plan. And so what I'm about to tell you goes above and beyond the dollar amounts that are outlined in this fact sheet. All right, the amount of money is significantly more than what we had originally envisioned. We thought we just needed 30 million, but actually the number is significantly more than that. And so far, we've been very successful with our partner NRCS in identifying the funds and securing the funds and bringing them back to the Cape. So let me just tell you a little bit about some of the things that we do. Much of our work really is to focus on degraded salt marshes with the focus on basically restoring and bringing back degraded salt marsh fisheries habitat, shellfish habitat, and essentially those are the main priorities of the program. On the back of this brochure, it essentially identifies the types of projects we will fund that are pretty much the bulk of the projects that we fund. We fund culverts, fish ladders, dry wells, and sand filters. When you look at these projects, they can be very expensive, but in many cases, what we're looking to do is to use this type of remedy to address a degraded coastal area. And over the years, we've restored a significant amount of salt marsh. We've restored over 200 acres of salt marsh, over 2,000 acres of shellfish habitat. We've been incredibly successful in this work. And as part of our process for updating our plan, Martha and Steve and the rest of our team, we have two other individuals who I really feel I need to name because they've been an integral part of this. One gentleman is named Rick DiVirgilio, and he is with the Conservation District. He used to work at NRCS. He's been instrumental in this program, as well as Don Liptak. I mention those names because many people who have worked with us are either familiar with me or with Steve. Now that Martha's on board, she's going to become an incredibly familiar face. But up until recently, you know, Rick and Don have had an enormous role in terms of working with the towns to identify projects that will be eligible for funding. And so over the past, I'd say the past several months, we've been anxious to get before you to identify where we think we may be able to be of assistance. Some of the projects that we've been involved in are very significant on the Cape. You might have heard and read about the restoration of the Herring River. This partnership.
In Wellfleet.
Yes, in Wellfleet.
I was gonna ask that question.
Yeah, that's right. We used to have so many herring rivers, I forgot about that. The Herring River project in Wellfleet, the Coonamessett River project in Falmouth, Parker's River in Yarmouth. These are all important watershed areas that have been eligible for funding, and we've been glad to participate with a host of other partners to help in the restoration of those areas. So we literally have projects in almost every town. The town that we're anxious to work with is with Harwich, quite frankly, because you have some very, very interesting projects, and you have a great team and staff that are very dedicated to this work, and we enjoy collaborating with them and talking to them about some of the things that you're trying to do here. So what I'd like to do is turn it over to Martha and then to Steve to talk a little bit about where we stand today and what we've been looking at. So I don't know if we've got any slides to put up on the screen, do you?
We do. We have a PowerPoint presentation that might help illustrate a few items.
I just wanted to inform you that the first round of projects, we actually had one in Harwich. We did a salt marsh restoration at Red River Beach. That was years back. So you've already been the beneficiary of one of these. So.
Should I sit here? It might be easier for me to
Your
stand.
choice, whichever you'd prefer.
Okay, and I will take the remote. Okay, thanks, Mark, for that great introduction. And Steve, my name's Martha
Do
Craig.
you mind standing at that desk right there so we can hear you?
Sure. Thanks, Joe. So I'm, as Mark mentioned, the new program manager at the district, but I was actually the Tidal Marsh project manager at the district 13 years ago now, and I worked with the town on the Red River Beach restoration project, and the town did an amazing job on that. A lot of my presentation, I was going to say, was just background. I think Mark's given a lot of that background. I would mention we did work with all 15 towns to come up with these 3 different types of project, which, if you look on the project site, include salt marsh restoration, which Red River Beach was a salt marsh restoration project. Mainly, the goal is to restore tidal flow by removing undersized culverts and replacing them with much larger culverts, depending on what's required. The other are fish passage projects, which seek to improve passage of primarily river herring, and also stormwater remediation adjacent to shellfish bed areas and other critical resources. And that's what those different symbols represent on the handout that you've been given. So as we said, there were a number of projects that were implemented in 2010 when there was an influx of federal money and we were able to implement the project. Red River Beach was one. There were also multiple stormwater remediations projects implemented in Harwich with great success, I think, primarily working with Don Liptak. So what I want to do is let you know where we are right now and present the projects that still remain within the town after NRCS and the district work to update this project. And I'm just going to skip ahead. So this is the fact sheet. And so what I'd like to do is just briefly show you the projects that are still on the list for the restoration project, and they are primarily fish passage projects, a little bit of salt marsh, but most of the stormwater projects have been done. And this is an illustration of a map that can be found in the updated plan that indicates where the projects in the different towns are with the descriptor of what's entailed with the project. And the projects here include some work up at Grassy Pond, and what we refer to now as Upper Cold Brook, and that's pinned here, and that would be a fish passage improvement project to replace the age culvert and water control structure that runs under Bank Street, and to do some modification of the fishway channel in Grassy Pond, for example. But what we did was we looked at the list of what remains as projects in the town, and we met with town staff to see what their priorities may be, particular for this upcoming year, as we try and find out what the different town priorities are, and then eventually, pretty soon, make a request to NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, for funding through this project for the various towns who are interested in receiving the funding to move the projects along. And another project that was shown or designated as a priority is the Route 124 bike path here on Route 124, and the description here is to the project would be to replace the culverts and install the water control structure at the outlet at Long Pond. And, there's more you can read about it, but I just want to point that out as a designated project, as well as other fish passage projects at the Punkhorn Road. There's a potential project at the bike path as it goes under Depot Street, and then the West Reservoir Fish Ladder is also part of the overall updated project, as well as a small salt marsh area off of Lothrop Road in West Harwich. So this table is a summary of the projects that remain designated now in the Cape Cod Water Resources Restoration Project for Harwich. And what I show here is the different types of projects, again, primarily fish passage and some salt marsh, together with an indication of the total construction cost and $2021. So we expect these to change over time. And Steve can maybe say more about the process, but in essence, NRCS is willing to fund 75% of the estimated construction, and at in some future time, and the towns would be responsible for a 25 non-federal match. Could be state money, could be town money. And NRCS and the district has gone through that exercise for each town and for each project. And we've talked to the town staff about that. And what they came up with their two top priority projects is the Upper Colebrook Fish Passage Project under Bank Street and the Route 124 bike path. And what was discussed was advancing not construction at this point, but technical assistance, which would be for design and studies of these structures. And so there's a cost estimate for that, and this is known as technical assistance in NRCS. And what that means, it's design money and then potentially down the road, money for construction management. But it's a source of funding that NRCS would cover 100%. And that there would be a 0% match requirement from the town. And that's in order to help the town progress forward with these projects. And then when it's time for construction, you know, you will have had time to think about match for that. So, and again, in discussions with town staff, these are the two that are prioritized. So what we would do is include these on part of the request to NRCS as funding for the town of Harwich to move forward with these projects. And I am happy to either discuss more about the process. Essentially, the town moving forward would enter an agreement with NRCS, as they have done in the past on other projects. And I'm happy to provide any more information that anyone is interested in receiving. And I will say, as well as Mark, I'm very interested in getting money for the town of Harwich. I have a long history here. And my grandfather was chairman of the Waterways Committee for a time and helped get Saquatucket built and was friends with Don Griffin. So thank you, and I'll either answer questions or I think Steve wanted to say something.
I just wanted to emphasize,
Mike, I'm sorry, Steve.
oh, excuse me. I just wanted to emphasize a few things that Martha said. These projects were developed in consultation with your town staff. We believe in what is called a locally led process. So we work very carefully with conservation, natural resources, and DPW to identify these projects. And then we run them through a ranking process. And then basically these are what came up on the list. So the town of Harwich is going to be a partner in this. The federal government, we will not come in and say, this is what you're going to do. So you'll be involved in all the design process, and the town is responsible for permitting. We don't do permitting, but we assist with the ingredients to the permitting, the design work, some of the ecological assessments. So essentially, when you look at these projects, what the town will be responsible for is permitting, any legal work that's necessary, and, as we say, 25% non-federal match. So let me point out that in some cases, some of the towns have gotten money from some state programs that can be used as part of that 25% match. And then there's one other thing. You can provide in-kind service, and we don't have to get into that right now. So we'll walk you through the whole process as you go along so that the timing is set for you to either ask town meeting or to do any other work that you need. Thank you.
Should I bring the mic over here?
You have one, that little
Yeah,
flat
that-
thing on your
that's in
table.
front of you.
Mark,
I've got one, Mark.
you're good.
You don't need this?
No.
You just need to move that around a little.
Okay, we will.
So I'd also like to mention that part of our job at the district is to help the towns with these agreements, and
Yeah. Let me
I'll
just,
just put that out there.
The cost information that we just presented, that's new information we just updated today. We'll get that to you so that you have that.
Great.
So, any questions?
I open it up to the board. Larry?
Sure, what type of timeline are you looking at? In other words, do we?
Well, the thing is for the technical,
The technical and then,
for the technical assistance, it would be helpful to get some direction from the board soon. That way we can essentially allocate and earmark those funds for Harwich. And I'm not sure if you could have read those dollar figures, but let me just read them to you. There were two design numbers, and I'm not sure,
Right here, it's about 400 and
$452,000 in 100% federal funds to do, under our technical assistance program, to do the design work associated with the Upper Cold Brook project and the Route 124 bike path. So what I would recommend that you do is at some point after you deliberate further over this and discuss it with staff and the town administrator, I would recommend that you vote to authorize the administrator to enter into an agreement with the NRCS for assistance under this program. And if you'd like us to draft the resolution, we can certainly do that. But most of the other towns, what often happens is the board will authorize a grant agreement with the town administrator. Some towns, they just authorize them as a board just to go ahead and do it. Because it's 100% grant money, you don't necessarily need to go to town meeting. You can essentially get this funding, allocate it to the project, and then expend it.
I just would like to add, we need to get our ask in March. Okay, so if you want to do it, that's all we need to do. We'll put together basically the paperwork for that, which will come afterwards, and will have to be signed sometime this summer. So in your timing, make the decision if you want to do it, direct the town staff to, work with that. And then sometime this summer, there'll be an agreement that needs to be signed, and then you have 5 years to do that technical work, that design work. You don't want to take that long, but then when you get the construction money, you have 5 years to implement. So this is not a rush, okay?
and that was gonna be, I think you probably answered it, but I think it's a great idea, but if we do the design, we're not obligated to carry through if we can't make it happen.
Well, we envision there may be circumstances that where you're not able to go forward with the project. But I think we've given I think we're hopeful that you're serious
Well,
about it.
hopeful too, I'm just
Right.
trying to be sure.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
No, we know that sometimes, you'll get an emergency, something will happen, you'll get a revenue drop because of a recession or COVID or something. We all know that in municipal government.
Yeah, don't go there, Mark, we'll.
Well, I think too that,
Continue.
that's why I mentioned that the district's here to help with the town with these agreements, and also looking forward to what might be needed in the future, so that the town could start thinking about what their non-federal match might be, including state grants that, we can help inform the town on. But, it gives you time to find those sources.
If I can just add, Larry, that usually projects that make our priority list will often make the priority list of other state agencies as well. And so we have found ourselves, for example, in the Herring River Wellfleet project, that's a $60 million project. The NRCS, the federal funding that's coming in is roughly $30 million. That's from this program. And the state of Massachusetts is in for $30 million. So I would find it inconceivable, just given what I've seen of your projects, they're going to rank reasonably high with some of the other state or the other non-federal agencies. And I think it's, as a former grant writer for the town of Harwich, I can think you're in a pretty strong position to attract other funds for this project. But like Martha said, part of our role is to assist in helping the town identify those other sources so that we can, And we often talk to these other agencies. Stephen, Martha, myself, we're in regular conversations with these other agencies because we're working with them on other projects, and we're always comparing notes on what everybody's doing. So I know this project is a project that other agencies are aware of as well, and they see it just as much as a priority as we do. So I think your chances of getting other funds to diminish and minimize the local share, your odds are pretty high.
Okay. You all set, Larry?
Well, just one follow-up. I'm curious, I think I see Heinz in this, I'll pick on Heinz because he's trying to hide right now. As I recall, we had an eel ladder at that same spot, or going in from Grassy Pond to, and I assume, will this supersede, or is it, am I right on that?
Good evening, Heinz Proft, Natural Resources Director. Larry was asking about the eel ramp, which we affectionately know as the elevator, which brings the eels up into Grassy Pond. I know,
Sorry,
but
I asked.
when they refer to fish passage, fish can include herring, it can include eels, but that location is one that they mentioned in their
So
second
this is an
slide.
improvement for the fish in addition to the
Correct.
ramp. Okay, thank you, Heinz.
And we work closely with Brad Chase,
Right.
and you folks know him.
Yeah.
In his role as working for DMF, and he's been all through these, and so you have a local connection.
I'd just like to make one comment on what you said before, Larry. Going forward, in my experience, going forward with design and then permitting really puts any kind of project in a good footing for additional funds when they see, oh, yeah, all this work has already been done, it's, permit ready or shovel ready, and that's oftentimes what funding agencies are looking for. Who has a project that's ready? So this would put Harwich in a good position for that.
Thank you.
Great. Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me start by saying I think it's a great thing. I mean, ultimately, it would be wonderful for Harwich. That having been said, I'm a little confused. The initial project money for the technical assistance, is that subject to local contribution too? Or?
No.
Okay,
That would
so-
be 100% federal funding.
So we could get past that with no further obligation. We're not going to get a promotional offer that expires and we need to pay.
Correct.
There's no obligation if something comes up and you can't proceed.
Okay, well, that was the extension to Larry's discussion.
And I would say, I don't know if this was mentioned, but the reason that we're here is that for many years, the project was not funded. And now we've gotten a considerable amount of federal funding, so they want to know what projects are ready and who's interested in getting money. So and what we've been told is, there's a considerable amount there this year, but as other states come on board and get their projects ready,
Right.
the competition will increase for funds.
And this comes out of the Farm Bill, which is basically set up about every 5 years. And so they fund this is called watershed operations in the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So it's not an annual thing as far as the idea from Congress. Every year, the agency has to look at projects and other kinds of considerations. But for the most part, it's a fairly steady stream of funding that's competitive. But that being said, nothing is guaranteed, but it's fairly good.
Thank you.
You all set?
Yeah.
Julie?
So back to your point on being ready and timing, et cetera. How long does it take, if we were to vote this and move forward, how long would it take for you to do the technical design so that then we can start looking at, where are we going for grants or other state funds, et cetera, or our own funds to get behind this? Because I like the idea of being ready. And I think we've learned with the sewer, the earlier the better that you're ready and the monies that are there.
Sure. Well, I would say the process would be, we would compile this request to NRCS, send it to them hopefully within the next couple weeks, so that they see what the projects are, they approve them all, ideally. Then NRCS would work together with the town to enter an agreement in sometime in August is the timeframe. And then after that agreement is signed, then the funds would be available, but they would be available on a reimbursement basis. But we could work with the town to help put together a proposal for any kind of technical work that would be done. And in most of these cases, I would say there needs hydrologic studies to confirm the water flow, and then look at a conceptual design and then a permit-ready design. So probably a year,
Yeah,
or
it's, the design
depends on
work
the
can be
consultant.
1 to 2 years. Then you've got permitting, which is at least another year. And then you've got to finish the design, which is probably 6 months to a year. So that's kind of the time frame. Now, the Conservation District has already got a study underway of Upper Cold Brook.
At
So
Bank
we've got a
Street.
lot of data already, and that was funded directly from NRCS to the Conservation District. And we do very little in-house design, we just don't have the staff. Our staff reviews the design done by private sector consulting firms, which the town would hire with money that we're providing. And then we all work together to talk that whole thing out. And as I said, you're very involved in that process. We have regular meetings, and when it gets to we do usually a 30% design, which is conceptual. Then it's moved up to permit ready, which is about 60%. You get your permits, any changes are incorporated to the final. So you probably got at least 3 years
Okay.
before you're ready for construction.
Joe, through you, Mary, is that something that we would, in terms of getting the experts involved and all that, do we have to go out with an RFP for that in this kind of scenario?
So I believe where it's technical assistance and it's government agencies, it would be more along the lines of an intermunicipal agreement.
Okay.
We rely on their documents, but not on the technical assistance part. To my knowledge, it would be more on construction work going forward, of course. But if I could also, I've heard at our meeting last week and again tonight, so the technical assistance funding is a reimbursement. And so one of the things we talked about last week, and the timing that could work out well, is we are able to see community preservation funds, correct? So
Yes.
when you talk about a March and then August timeframe, we could then build CPC applications on technical assistance and start to prime the pump, so to speak, on the construction project in the future.
So you could use that for your permitting costs.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
This all sounds great. My questions were going to be to Joe. What do we need to do to go forward with this? I see a lot of nods from Amy, but I guess, should we bring this back and have people like Amy and Hines speak to us about the
You
project?
certainly can do that. The plan was, as Mark said, is have them give you an introduction to the program, and then we rely upon that resolution to have you voted next week.
Okay.
And so that would give us direction to move on to these two projects. I can take the liberty of speaking for staff because I asked them the same question. So Amy Usowski, Heinz Proft, and Cooper were in the meeting last week, and I asked them, were these the projects I wanted to move forward on, and they are. And I'm going to give credit where credit is due. Amy, right out of the gate, talked about how the timing could be perfect for Cold Brook because of what HCT is doing on the lower end. So being able to do a project like that, where we're already working on that, and then both of these projects, as the speakers have said here, are connected either to, conservation groups of the state, state agencies, and DCR. I think they're still called that, right? Conservation and Recreation?
It's, the agency that has been spun off is called DER, Division of Ecological Restoration. We actually now have a state agency that's dedicated, so relatively new. When we started doing this, we were by ourselves, but the DER is now our
So for
major
me,
partner.
the DCR reference was to our new partners, and I'm going to say it that way on the record, Conservation and Recreation with the bike trail. So again, there are agencies out there in the state that are partnering with us on Cold Brook, and there have been agencies in the state that have partnered with us on that end of the bike trail. So those two projects, I think, are perfect. But again, we'll get the resolution, we'll bring it back for a board vote next week, and then we have that timing in place for the request in March, the agreement in August, and start building local applications to assist.
Excellent. You're one of my favorite presentations. It doesn't cost us anything to do things we want to do. It doesn't get any better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
And again, I think
thank you very much.
all we can do is just applaud your staff, Heinz and the team. They're terrific to work with. They really are. And we're looking forward to working with you on this.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
have to ask, Marcia, did we work together on Muddy Creek?
We did Muddy Creek,
You
and
look familiar, yeah.
yeah,
I
we
looked
did.
today, yeah, that was you helped us a lot, although it got.
It was a great project.
It was a long time to get permitted. It was a
Yeah.
bit of a, yeah.
Well, Martha was working for the district at the time, and then she was so involved in the Herring River
So you couldn't get away.
restoration
I
and
know, I
Wellfleet,
remember that
so
when
we
you
let her
took care of
go,
the
and now
Herring
we've been able to lure her back.
Yeah.
But my heart's really in Harwich.
We appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next is item C, discussion on possible amendments to the town administrator's fiscal year 2024 operating budget. Which of the 800 pages shall we start with?
Well, believe it or not, you should start with the 5 that were just handed out in front of you.
Excellent.
And I can certainly explain. So, what you saw in the packet was the
That-
budget that I had
this-
presented at the last meeting. And you should now have a document that has today's date on it that reads FY 2024 Operating Budget Board of Selectmen Recommendations. And that was based on board input on my budget. So,
The thing I see is dated February 6th.
Says February 6th.
right, Board of Selectmen Recommendations.
Yeah, we have that.
Yep, so that's the one you
Okay.
want to focus on for now. It updates what was in the packet.
Okay.
So, as you know, we had a discussion at your last meeting relative to my budget obligations, and now this evening, you'll have an opportunity to talk about some of those ads, and I'll go through them in just a moment, that you had requested be added to the budget. And then the following item would be to vote to transmit all of that to the Finance Committee. And again, this is all heading towards not just town meeting in 70 days, but the budget discussion a week from Saturday.
Okay.
And so if I could, Madam Chair, and for the members, so the 5-page document you have in front of you has the headlines, the column headers of the 2022 actual budget, the 2023 original budget, the 2024 requests, those were what came in from the departments, and now there's a new column that says 2024 Board of Selectmen. Now, only for ease of purposes of reviewing, do you have it that way? What we'll have going forward is the requests that the departments made. You'll have my column as TA recommendations, and then your column, and after March 4th, we'll be able to add the column related to the Finance Committee. So what I'd like to do is first just rely upon my notes that relate to the paper you have. So as you may recall at your last meeting, you directed me to update the administration budget. So if you're looking on page number 1, and you can draw your attention to lines 24, 25, and 26. And so the, give me one moment so I can get my originals up. So what I had presented to you at your last meeting was a total request of administration in the amount of $601,861. And so what has been added is what we're referring to when I say we, the Assistant Town Administrator, Megan Eldridge, and I have been working on your directive for a position we're referring to as Human Resources Administrator. And so what is in that line is, you may recall in the personnel bylaws, there had been for years a position known as Personnel Director. It was unfilled, but it was in the classification and compensation table. So we're contemplating changing that to be a more up-to-date title of Human Resources Administrator. And the salary line for that ranges from $85,000 to $110,000. And so what was put in there was $95,000 for that role. But this is meant to accomplish the board's directive of at least 3 of you saying to add that role, and that's what's in that line item. I can continue, Madam Chair, to other lines, unless you want me to take questions as we go along.
Want to ask a question?
Yeah, this is going to get too
Go ahead.
convoluted if it goes too
Yep.
long. Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been giving a lot of thought to that. I've really started to come to the point of view that you folks had about needing one. But I also think about this organizationally, and I kind of want to know how that's viewed, because personally, I would think that this should be a direct report, because ultimately, you're exempting the town administrator from, well, you're inferentially exempting them, because nobody's going to come forward to a human resources officer if it's about somebody that the human resources officer reports to. That's my 2 cents, but I mean, I'd be willing to do it, but it really depends on how it's organizationally structured.
I think you're saying what I had always said. I think this position should report to us.
Yeah, like a
Yes.
finance director
Yes,
or
like the
yeah.
finance director, correct.
Yes,
That was my vision.
if that's your vision, I'm coming closer.
Well, I don't know that my vision rules, but that was just my thoughts on it. But does that matter where it sits in the budget?
Yeah, because it matters what department is actually going to.
Okay. So where does it go? Up under selectmen?
Well,
or it's whole
I hate
lot?
to open up this old wound again, but if we're not doing a change to the personnel plan at town meeting to describe how we're doing it, then it really needs to be discussed before it rolls into town meeting, that this is going to be a position that's funded and it's going to be structured over this way. Because you can't get them to just vote for money.
Right.
With,
Well, and I'll open that wound a little bit, because, this'll, I'm not gonna argue whether it's needed or not, because it would help, obviously, but this will be the 3rd position we're adding in the last year, right? We had,
Yep.
and I think that has to be very apparent at town meeting. So, in the past, we've put that in as a different article, but it has to be apparent, has to be discussed, because we're adding, costs that are long-term. It's not a 1-year
Right.
cost. And that's why originally it went to town meeting as a separate article to get people to weigh in, that we realize there's an increased budget long-term. So if we move forward on this, I do want to open that wound, because I think it has to be well public, has to be out there so people understand it. Because, we have a limited budget, and so this will be, 220, it'll be 300, basically, $200,000, $250,000 we're adding in the last year or so.
Right.
70, 14, 21, another, so, it's like they said way back when, being here, being there is real money. Well, this turns out to be real money.
Agreed. Julie? Any
yeah, well, I
comments?
mean, I think that in response to that, not that I disagree, and I'm fine with whatever way we're gonna go about it, but I would say also that, while we look at budgets increasing and free cash, et cetera, we also look at the departments and the load on all the departments. So to me, and this personnel person would be another person, but we also have extenuating circumstances over the last couple of years since COVID, construction projects, conservation projects, and all of that, what that means for the staff, right? And so in creating somebody who's neutral that would report to the board, although it is another position, we're also seeing taxation on our departments. So I think it's always been around, but we've never had a personnel person since I've been on the board. And I know that we are adding another body, and I understand what you're saying, so I don't disagree with you at all. But, I'm okay with splitting it, either putting it as an article, but I'm also okay with including it in the budget, because it is a budgetary item. We have staff, we have increased staff, we have increased workloads. I mean, I would go so far as to say that we're looking at adding somebody to conservation, and I think maybe the building department. Do I have that right? Right? And so that's an increase in personnel. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's reacting to what they're all dealing with.
If I may, just,
Yes.
thank you, Julie, for that. I, sorry to disagree. I guess I take the same point you made and say, well, if I'm giving a preference, my preference would probably be to protect the existing staff we have. You know, if we have a finite budget number, which we do, we're a town, we're not the federal government, we have a finite number, well, then I'd put money into building, you know, ones that I'd protect the staff we have before I added another staff. So we can go around robin for this forever, I'm not going to, but that's.
No, and can I just react to that? Because
Go right ahead.
I agree, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you on that platform. But I would also say that we've lost a lot of people over time, and that costs the town money. So as much as we want to protect the current staff, but we also want to keep people in place, because it costs us money when we lose people, and it's always good to have a neutral place for the employees to go. And I think it's imperative for the employees to have that. I think it not only entices people to be able to, you know, have a way to vet a problem, but it also allows the town to look at the positive impact that that has on the employees and the ability to keep them. So although it's another salary, it's really cheap money compared to what it's cost us to lose different people over the course of time.
And go ahead. I just wanted to say, I agree with Don on this, that it needs to be to us, so it is that neutral body. And I've also changed my opinion. I know I argued the opposite last year with the cultural position and the housing position, to have them in the budget, because we had talked about that for almost a year. And I felt anybody who didn't know we were doing that really didn't care. This is pretty new. We're only, did you say 70 days? We're only 70 days out, and we're just talking about it. So I do think this ought to be its own article. Yes, Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Julie's point, I think it would be a mistake to conflate what we're doing and how we would do it. So the reason that the article doesn't mean that every year you'd have an article. I mean, historically, what had been done was you brought it up as a staffing plan change and then funded it so that people could have this open discussion, and it wasn't a where's Waldo in the budget about where can I find that. But in subsequent years, once the argument has been made, and by the way, town meeting has always been really good once you explain what it is you're trying to accomplish at funding it. If it
We
was,
can explain it, though.
but once it gets out there, it gets passed, it gets folded into the subsequent year's budget, and it always appears there from then on in. It is a continuing thing. It's not like a warrant article every single year to fund it.
No, I didn't think that's what you meant.
I'm just hoping that everybody understands
Okay,
that.
you're saying it for the public, because
Yeah.
I definitely know that. I mean, obviously,
Okay.
we would bring it to town meeting under an article,
Right.
if need be, if that's the way we want to go. But of course, then once voted, if positively, it would be in the budget.
Because that's where you could explain not only what it is, what it
Right.
does, how much it costs, but where it reports to. That article could make it crystal clear about what's happening.
And similar to Mary, you know, I felt differently last year about the other two positions. I'm fine with this being an article.
Right. Okay.
If I may, Madam Chair, to
Yes, you
sort
may.
of rain a little bit on our garden party, I apologize. I did not understand this to be a senior executive role, so that I would urge you to reconsider the salary level. I understood this to be an administrator-type role, which is more policy. If you're going to have it reporting directly to the board, you're essentially creating a senior executive role, so you want the salary to reflect that.
Right.
So I think that 85 to 110 is low if you're going to have that as a decision maker at that level.
What do you think, what level do you think we are, Joe?
If you're considering that role like the other four that you have, meaning administrator, finance director, chief of police, and fire chief, you're talking about an employment agreement, you're talking about a salary that tends to be higher than the senior managers and managers.
Okay.
So I think you're trending closer to the 130s.
Okay. Do we need to vote on that? What do we do with that?
Well, I think what you should do at the end is make any recommendations on your budget column, so to
Okay.
speak, and that will impact the bottom line that gets delivered over with the sources and uses to Finance Committee. So right now, that line item has gone up by 95,000.
We'd add 35K to our line item. Right?
I'd say another 40,000 gets you in the
Or
ballpark.
40, okay.
And where would you put it? Under
Well, I think
selectmen?
for
or-
right now, you
Doesn't
put it in
matter?
administration.
Yeah, okay.
You've talked about an article, that could be an appropriating article. But for right now, you want to have it reside somewhere.
So you
could
can
put
still
there, you
have
could
it
put
sit
in,
there.
Selectmen, yep.
Okay. You can probably go on to item 2.
All right, thank you. Item 2, I think. Yep, is, let me see here, you're gonna look at line items 40 through 42, and that's conservation. And that is adding the enhancement of services that was requested by our conservation administrator. And that would be 23,784, and that would be for additional counter and administrative support. So that would be along the lines of an administrative assistant role, I believe. So if you look at your column, it reflects that dollar amount, and that's the increase from my budget to your budget. And again, that was lines 40 through 42.
Any questions, Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is one position where I can actually rationalize that it's not a budget buster, because we can examine what it is we're doing vis-a-vis fees, because this is about compliance. For people who've gotten approvals, we have a complete inability because of the staffing to be able to follow up on anything and actually hold anybody accountable. The process, as Amy described from KP Law, is daunting. Every single day, you got to go out there when they're out of compliance, take notice of the fact that they're out of compliance, make a report up, and then violate them out. There's no way of doing that without hands. But by the same token, that's the cost of the project. I mean, if people absolutely want to get the approval from Conscom that they require to be able to pull off a project, and then get to walk away by saying, we don't have to do it, it's pointless. And I think that it can be driven by the fees that are relative to the projects involved.
Anyone else?
No, I'm just pleased it's in there again. If you need that.
Say again?
It's in there, right?
Correct.
The addition,
Yep.
yeah. No, I'm pleased with that.
We really need
Okay.
that.
Julie?
Yeah, I think just the sheer volume of what they're dealing with, NOIs,
Oh,
all
yeah,
of it. Yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of prep work, it's a lot of hearings, a lot of repeat hearings, so, they really
Amy
need
does
this.
that with a smile, so that's what it's.
Yeah, so I fully support that.
Okay, Joe, we're good with that one.
All right, then, next one, I believe. I think that completes the directives of the board as far as additional changes to the budget for enhancement of services. So then, Madam Chair, what I would recommend as part of your discussion, we can then go to the document we received this evening from the Finance Director, which was updates regarding the fiscal year 2024 sources and uses, which we have in front of us tonight. Will be this document here.
Mary?
What?
One
Yes,
question.
Julie.
Before we move to that, I wanted to mention the whole early childhood education, and
Oh,
that would
thank you,
be,
yep.
another article, before we move on to the new info.
And my intent this evening was, we just talked about your adds to the budget, and then we can talk about sources and uses, and we can go back for other discussions, both under C and D.
Okay. Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I do.
Hi. We all know who you are, but can you say it for the record?
Sorry about that. Anne Marie Ellis, resident and finance director, town accountant.
Thank you. Do you want to walk us through this and,
Do we want to walk through the original one or the new one as well? The late
Yes.
handout?
take us through the changes that got us to the latest? No sense dwelling on the past.
Okay. The documentation provided in this response is to correcting receipt application to the FY '24 forecast budget in keeping with proper accounting procedures. It has come to our attention that the Harbor Master Department had been allocating a percentage of their boat electricity fees to offset their electricity utility power heat expense account, and this has been ongoing since fiscal year of 2013. The Harbor Master, the Accounting Department, and the Treasurer's Department have all been instructed on the correct applications for receipts and expenditures, with an emphasis on why receipts cannot be allocated to an expense account. The auditors, Powers and Sullivan, have also been informed. To remedy the situation, we have created a revenue account titled Electricity Boat Fees and given it a number here, and given it a forecast budget of $47,000. As well as an increase in receipts forecast for the FY '24 in the same amount. We then increased the account titled Electricity Utility Power Heat, with that account number listed, in a forecast of an additional $50,000. Additionally, the waste disposal revenues from the DPW titled Recycle Newspaper shows a negative balance for the fiscal year of 2020. A discussion had revealed that the recycling of newspaper may cost the town instead of producing revenue. This, too, will be remedied by having the department choose an expense line to allocate the charges. So essentially, you want to make sure that no charges are getting placed against a revenue and no revenue is being placed against an expenditure. There are two minor reasons why you would see that. And that's if, in the event you have a non-sufficient check, the treasurer would charge it against the revenue account until you've receipted it. Likewise, on an expenditure account, the only time you'd see a receipt against that is if you had a refund, if we had overpaid or were due a credit from one of our vendors, but not receipts to lower the expenditures. The town has received the actual FY '24 health insurance rates, and the new amount calculated on projected and actual employees and retirees is $5,342,192, which resulted in a reduction of $250,077 from the previous forecast. And finally, the last change to the sources and uses document is the revision of the town administrator's forecast for the town operating budget to $29,951,952, leaving $1,309,154 remaining in net sources and uses. And attached, you have your new uses and sources document. You have the backup to show the change to the revenue. And you have the town administrator's expense.
Okay. Lots of numbers. I guess my biggest concern is that this is about the fourth one of these in a couple of weeks, so I'm hoping this is the finale. Are we confident that this is the finale?
I'm as confident as I can be, barring anything that just pops up.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's a positive thing when you get an actual number and then you can change it and reduce your budget.
Yeah,
You're getting finer and finer.
Yeah.
And closer to a number.
good. Who wants to start? Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure who I'm addressing this question to be honest with you, but where does the wastewater budget reside in this thing?
They're a separate enterprise.
They still have to get appropriated funds from town meeting. We have to produce a budget. Doesn't matter what the source of the funding is. They can't spend a nickel unless town meeting approves the appropriation of the money out of that account.
We have traditionally put those budgets under separate articles with separate spreadsheets and all of that. The focus this evening is on the operating budget, which is general fund. If you look at the handout from tonight, very top of the page where it says general fund balance, that figure of $761,076 represents the transfer from general fund to water, wastewater, because they are enterprise. But the budget itself does not reside in the operating budget and is a standalone and separate budget.
My recollection is we always saw budget numbers before.
And you will for the discussion on March 4th. But the impact for it, for operating budget is the line I mentioned at the top.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because at least a part of what our discussion was in prior years was how to fund a deficit position in the wastewater portion of that account. And that discussion always revolved around the town government side.
Sure, so that's the number at the top of the page on the
Which
document
number
that
again?
says.
Which page,
Sorry,
Joe?
this one
That
here, Board of Selectmen recommendations.
Yep,
Very top of the page, general fund balance.
yep.
Am I correct on that, Anne Marie, thank you. So if you look at the very top of the page, page 1, you see the number of $761,076. That represents a transfer from the general fund balance to the water, to the wastewater enterprise account for the purpose that you've described, Mr. Howell. And then further detail comes at the budget meeting on March 4th, where they present their water and wastewater enterprise budgets.
They being,
In this instance, the superintendent, but it could also be a representative from the Board of Water Wastewater Commissioners.
okay. So they set that budget,
Correct.
the
Yep,
commissioners.
separate and distinct from the operating budget.
I guess my problem is it's still part of the town's obligations. I don't care that, I was here when the enterprise fund got created. I mean, but it was definitely a mechanism to try to stop the town from using the water department as a checking account, because they were receiving ratepayers' money and we were taking it on the town side to do things with it, but we'd always actually considered my budget run-up recollection is we had numbers. I mean, this is kind of next week, after next week, it's March. And we haven't seen anything from them.
Julie?
But isn't that one of many revolving funds, and so to your
Not
point-
revolving.
That's not a
but
revolving
enterprise.
fund.
Enterprise, sorry.
Correct.
Well,
Right,
we have
so
two
that-
enterprise funds,
Yeah,
right?
so then we go,
Correct.
right,
Golf,
golf,
golf
No.
is in here, right? Isn't golf enterprise?
Golf is not enterprise. at
Golf
all.
is a revolving fund.
It is on
Revolving
the
funds
Okay.
don't get appropriated. You establish the revolving fund, and that's the cap.
My mistake, I thought we
The-
moved
but
golf over too.
This is a real budget as an enterprise.
Madam Chair, if I could try this
Yes.
again.
Please.
This document that I'm holding that says fiscal year 2024 operating budget Board of Selectmen recommendations. The impact in this document related to the retained earnings for the wastewater department is reflected at the top line, general fund balance, the figure of $761,076. Now, you can see that it's a considerable difference from previous years, but that's because we have wastewater retained earnings starting, where we didn't in years past. The other phrase that was used is revolving fund. None of these numbers have anything to do with revolving fund.
Right, that is.
So in years past, in Appendix B, you would see a total number that was close to 73 or more million dollars that the moderator had objections to. The moderator wants to see what we expect to be Appendix B, to be the operating budget, which corresponds to Article 4 on the operating budget. Other budgets, such as the water wastewater budgets, may be, I believe, Articles 6 and 7 will have their own breakout and their own information, the presentation of which will take place on March 4th.
And so just to clarify, the 761 number, that's net for the water, wastewater?
Bless you.
That's
Can you
wastewater
speak to
debt
that?
subsidy, debt subsidy.
Say
So
that again,
in-
please?
wastewater debt subsidy.
Debt subsidy, that's what this is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in your earlier package for all of the backup to one of the other sources and uses, you had a FY '24 total transfers in from other sources. So that was your cable fund, two betterments, excuse me, the water and wastewater indirect costs,
Right,
so
I
paying back.
saw that, I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out that, but that's not in here, that's separate then. That's not part of the 761.
Right.
Don?
Hate to beat a dead horse, but it appears to be on the ground already. There's no way of knowing how reasonable that general fund transfer is without knowing what the receipts are on this thing that we're not going to see yet. I mean, because it's already $1.1 million less than the original budgeted for 2023. And considerably less than, considerably more than that is the difference between the 2022 actual. I'd surely love to know that they have receipts that are making that number be driven down.
They are, but enterprise fund receipts do not impact upon a general fund operating budget.
To the extent that we're not donating, we're directing money into that to cover a deficit, it does.
And I think that's where the finance director has made reference to the sources and uses document, second page of her packet, under the total transfers in from other sources. But that is separate and distinct from the operating budget. So we can certainly provide more information on the transfers and where the water, wastewater budgets are, but they would not be part of the operating budget. Because this is what is anticipated to be paid for through the general fund.
It's never been on this page. I know that because I looked at last year's of this document, and wastewater and water have never been on this summary sheet.
If it was, it's that there was the line number 7, total transfers in from other sources.
Okay,
If you expand upon that, there's a list of numbers that roll back up to it,
okay.
to that $1.369 million number.
But our wastewater and water budgets are greater than that.
Correct. What I'm trying to respond to was, where is it in the operating budget? And
Right,
it
and it's
wouldn't.
not.
Correct.
So I guess, to move on, that's just not part of this discussion tonight, wastewater and water. And that
Correct.
will be part of March 4th?
Correct.
That's the first
Yes,
time
we're
that we'll
waiting more
see that.
detail.
Correct.
What's that?
We're waiting more detail, basically.
Yep,
Correct.
okay.
Yep.
All right, let's move on. Any other questions, comments?
Just in a broad way, we keep, and I'm not going to challenge these, by the way.
It's good.
But we keep increasing the number for local receipts, which is interesting that I guess we get better information, but that's a little, not scary to me, but what happens is when we underestimate the revenue, that builds us in for it. Surpluses that then build into free cash.
Mm-hmm.
And as we keep building this up so we can justify the budget, we're going to pay a penalty for that next year in the sense we won't have much free cash. So that's okay, it's a decision we make, but it's something we need to keep in mind. I guess is my only point. I was a little more comfortable, I think, when we didn't raise that quite so much in hopes that we would have surpluses that would help us generate some finance for next year. So in some ways, in some sense, that's a zero-sum game in the way we play it. Just point it out, we have to be careful with it. Because I know people don't like, well, I shouldn't say that. People are pretty indifferent, but there's people that like free cash. That's not quite true because we use it. My only, and which I'm good with, as long as we clearly define how we're gonna use it. But I'm just pointing it out, by doing it, we're making a conscious decision that it will cause, results will show up next year.
But I think we gave pushback last week or 2 weeks ago that we thought that, based on the free cash being so high and the receipts that we have seen increasing,
Yeah, I'm just
that
pointing
we
out
should
that-
push that up.
Right, and we did, I agree with that. We pushed it up a lot, I'm just pointing
Yeah.
out where we are, that, I just want to be sure it's a conscious decision.
Yeah. It's, what, $1 million, $1,000,005, and our free cash was 7 something, so I feel like we're still okay,
Free cash was 7.44 million.
7.4, so that's not a big increase to the, I don't think. Anyone else? Local, you have concerns about local receipt number, Don?
No, and that gets back to the original problem of how did we get here with free cash? Because I mean, personally, I think it's too high. I mean, I would have thought it would be 3 or 4 million, and that kind of starts with underestimating receipts. So you get to the end of the year and say, "Wow, we did really well." But if you keep doing really well, then you're not as a percentage. Because the 70 million isn't a number. The town side budget is 40, what? 44 or something like that, somewhere in that vicinity. As a percentage of 44 million as opposed to 70 million, $7 million is a really big miss. Yeah, so I would feel more comfortable with recognizing the receipts.
No, we don't want to do that, but just,
I-
we go from 5 to 10, or we go from percent increase.
No, I'm just saying I would like to be able to recognize reasonable receipts and not just keep being so conservative that we wind up with $7-8 million of free cash. It's way too much.
In my own opinion, oh, Julie, go ahead.
I just, not that this is as big of numbers as we're discussing right now, but the cherry sheets, are those hard numbers now? Do we know that?
No, not until March 1st at the earliest, the governor's budget.
That's what I thought.
However, we've been hearing from the State House that they're not looking to do any harm.
Okay.
What was that, Joe?
They're not looking to do any harm. So we're not necessarily expecting a change either way on the numbers.
We're not going to get a bill.
But the governor's budget's not due out, which is the beginning budget, until March 1st.
So we can take that to the bank? No harm?
And then the overlay, the abatements and taxes, it's 450 in 2023. We got 450 again. Are we pretty confident that that's where we're at too? Again, they're not huge numbers. they're
Right,
just-
well, we are, you know, the overlay, the abatements and taxes, those are historical numbers. You know, our finance director talks regularly with the Department of Revenue. When she had discussions with them back in the late fall, early winter, talking about tax classification and all that, they dive into all these numbers.
Okay.
I think the thing that I take from this is if you draw your attention down to the semi-fixed costs, because again, as Anne Marie's indicated, you know, on the health insurance, we have actual numbers that came to us with the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group from 2 weeks ago. So these are now actual numbers, where we were doing estimates before, and we were girding ourselves for as much as a 6% increase. And that didn't come to pass. In fact, there were 2% and 4% on most of the accounts that our employees rely upon. Debt service is the other big one. You know, we have debt service coming down second year in a row, and then Barnstable County Retirement. Now, OPEB, that's a zero sum because that's what we've traditionally put in for 250, but that's a policy decision that could be made by the board. Property and liability insurance, again, we were expecting a 6% increase. We know some other insurers of municipalities came in at that, but we came in at 4.9. So when you see that 3.6% reduction in semi-fixed costs, that's not something we're anticipating, but these numbers are firming up.
Anything else?
Joe, what is our OPEB obligation?
You would ask that. I don't know that I know that off the top of my head, and I
wouldn't
don't know that
expect
the
you to,
finance
maybe.
director may know that yet off the top of her head.
For OPEB, no, not off the top of my head, and I think
I
that's
wouldn't expect
several
you to, by the
documents
way.
of
It might be,
a while
I'd
back.
be interested in the future.
We can add that to the menu of things to make sure we talk about on March 4th.
Okay, that's fine.
So we'll be fully depressed.
Sorry.
We're on installment payments.
And if I could say, I believe the number we're going to be able to reference is close to a year old, meaning the auditing process and all that. I seem to recall we got a number last summer of where the obligations are. And again, you know, we're part of Barnstable County, so it's really big through their numbers. So we can give a number, but it's not going to stay the same. Our commitment to OPEB, I think, remains the same, which is a good thing. We can get more information on that.
Okay. I think we're on to D. We need a motion to,
So, Madam Chair, if I could.
sorry.
Only because I promised you could go back to the operating budget if you wanted, but I did some furious numbers, so bear with me. Based on the discussion you had about a senior executive for human resources, the number that is in the budget right now is $140,000. So that was an increase of, I gotta do math.
35.
Thank you. That's what I put in,
Right.
35,000. So what happens then is your overall number in the spreadsheet that would be used to transmit to Finance Committee has a bottom line for total departmental budgets of $30,089,948. So 30089,948. And that represents a 3.35% increase over the original budget a year ago. And the dollar increase year over year is $973,953. So 973,953.
okay?
Mary, can I ask
I
one
w- yep.
question through to Joe? The last meeting we had, I think, Don, you pointed out some discrepancy or some interest in the number of firefighters that didn't match up with what we thought was the right budget numbers. Did you reconcile that?
It wasn't the numbers that I had to reconcile, it was the explanation. And my understanding in talking to Chief LeBlanc is there is expected to be a reduction in overtime. However, when you look at the overtime line item, you're not going to see an overall year-over-year decrease. Rather, what he's anticipating is the number that he expects to come in at is not going to be anywhere near as high as what it would have been. So the numbers that he's put in there are verified because of offsetting for overtime. So even though it costs more to bring in a firefighter, there's savings elsewhere within the overall budget because of the other line items.
So just from I guess, accounting is probably the wrong term. I don't want to build this more than it is. He wouldn't build that into a line item that made sense. He's leaving it kind of mushy and then expecting to pick it up somewhere else.
I think what he did is he, when he's evaluating his overtime line item, it did not go up anywhere near the commensurate result. So when
I
you're looking,
understood your explanation on that. I'm just saying that normal, just keeping track of things, he could reduce his overtime budget somewhat and put it into the salary so it makes sense.
so I think what's happening is that new firefighters and firefighter paramedics, their salary is built into the salaries and wages line, as is the overtime line. And so when you see that net increase of 120,000, it's the total cost, not of a firefighter, but the total cost of the salary and wages line item. That's as much as I want to say that on his behalf. I'll leave it to him. But the numbers that were presented are confirmed.
And that sounds like a good discussion for when the department heads are all
It
come
makes
in.
sense to me. It's just,
Yeah.
I find it be more exacting if they had the numbers split out, I guess, somewhat, but it's his decision.
Right. I'll take, Don?
Yeah, just in support of what Larry said, we live in a line item in budget environment with the state. I get what you're saying, that the summary for the line will wash out, but I don't agree how we got there, because ultimately, if the obligation we're incurring is for salaries and wages. It should reside in that and not in the overtime line that in that stew that comes down with a total. It should be expressed where it's expended, which is salaries and wages, not overtime. Unless overtime is just a minor component of salaries and wages, but it isn't. It exists as a number.
On this report, it is, because all you've got your choice of is salaries and wages and other expenses.
Maybe, but when we get a salary book, we get a budget book,
Right.
there are line items.
Then it'll be separate.
So this is a net number, is what we're saying.
Can I just?
Go ahead, Julie.
So, again, I thought, this is what I remember too, from when we're going over the general fund money, right, the numbers. Then we go on March 4th, which is this year, and we look at the munis report, which gets into all of that detail.
Right.
So we're gonna see the overtime, we're gonna see salary, and, we're gonna see uniforms, we're gonna say whatever, well, I know it's somewhat included in other pieces, but we're gonna see that breakdown in the munis report, right? That's where we're gonna go through
We should.
each
It's not,
piece.
yeah, we should. It wasn't clear what we were going to, is my point.
This is an adjunct to the prior discussion, however. The discussion with town meeting can't be that it's gonna cost us like $30,000 to $40,000 a firefighter, and we're gonna add 4 of them, because that's not true. That's what the net number is that we're increasing. In full disclosure, you have to tell town meeting, we're picking up 4 employees, and the total cost of that is so-and-so. The second discussion is, but we're saving some over here. But you have to disclose what you're bringing on as the obligation.
Just clarify it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
So noted.
so noted.
So unless there's any further discussion on the recommended operating budget, under item D, per the Town of Harwich Charter, Chapter 9, Section 3, Clause 932, the board must vote to recommend the fiscal year 2024 budget to the Finance Committee. So if you could carry this over until the 27th and still be in concert with the charter. However, if you're ready to send it over, you should vote to send it over.
I would suggest we send it over. There's no point in not, and I would say we should classify it as a working document, that we're still working on it, but there's no reason finance can't work on it at the same time.
And to that end, Madam Chair, I was going to say it later, but I'll say it now. We have that budget meeting starting on Saturday, March 4th at 9 a.m. here in the Griffin Room, which is a joint meeting between you and the Finance Committee. So that's when we would expect them to really get into the budget, and they're meeting their obligation under the charter by having a public hearing on Thursday, March 9th. Here,
I'm not really sure.
All right.
I would imagine.
at an undisclosed location at that point, but we'll know before, by March 4th. Point being, as you've now, so I've done my part of the process, transferred it to you folks. You're doing your part, you transfer it to the Finance Committee, and then we all get back together again and go back over this too.
Okay, can I take a motion on D? Don, did you want to say something?
Yeah, regardless of the motion, I hate to be a curmudgeon here, but 926, I'm still like flummoxed because 926 says the budget shall provide,
Sorry, 932 is what I thought I said.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying 926, which also appears in the charter. The budget shall provide a complete financial plan for all town funds and activities and shall be in the format the Finance Committee may suggest if the format suggested is compatible with commonly accepted methods. The budget shall indicate proposed expenditures for both current operations and capital projects during the ensuing fiscal year, detailed by divisions, departments, offices, and town agencies. The reason I'm just going to, I'm not going to vote in favor, but I'm not going to vote against either, is because that whole section about water is missing, and we have no idea what that's going to wind up looking like. And I get what the town moderator said, but town charter says we have to have a complete financial plan for all departments outside of the revolving funds, which I totally get. There's an article for that, My feelings about revolving funds are well known, but there is at least it's not a budget, and you don't have an appropriation. You just appropriate the entire amount that's their ceiling for a year on funds. But this is a department that actually runs on appropriations. They come from a different source. They come from ratepayers, not taxpayers, but it's still a town agency. And I don't know, I would be happy if we had an adjunct next to this, but we're only referring part of what we need to refer to Finance Committee.
Larry, did you want to say something?
Well, I take Don's, it's a good point. My issue is one of timing, and this will not be a final budget because we haven't had a March 4th meeting yet.
Right.
So we have other issues, so I'm comfortable sending this over as a document to meet this requirement, and then realizing that it won't be done until it's done, basically, just to use bad grammar. And so I would, I wish it were so, but we still have the department heads to come in, we still have water to do it, so it'll certainly change some before it's final, I guess is my point. So in saying that, I would move that we, per town charter, the one I'm picking, Don, is Chapter 9, Section 3, Clause 932, to recommend the fiscal year 2024 budget to the Finance Committee.
That's there too.
Are you willing to add as a working document? I don't want anyone to think this is the finished
Well,
product.
as a working document, I guess I'm taking that for granted because
Yeah.
we know we have meetings coming up, but that would maybe help Don's point to verify that. Yeah.
Okay. Did I hear a
Yeah,
second?
I seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstaining. So 3-0-1.
Thank you. I'll transmit that tomorrow.
One other question on that, Joe. What's our date commitment to get the budget to finance?
So according to that section of the charter, it's on or before the 4th Tuesday of February.
So before March 4th, we need to see wastewater and we need to get it to finance. We haven't met that obligation until we get them
So,
wastewater.
yeah, I can only tell you that the process that I've done this year matches the process I've done every year as town administrator, an interim town administrator, and I believe comports with predecessors. The discussion has always been relative to the operating budget, given the size and complexity of it. It's my understanding that's why the town has always relied upon the non-charter directive, but equally important, budget round robin session, which this year is Saturday, March 4th.
Okay.
Because what you have is a document known as sources and uses, which encompasses every cent that we expect to raise, appropriate, and spend, as well as others, as well as the operating budget detail, which you've gone over tonight. So I would argue that we are still in compliance with the charter.
Okay.
Sorry, Don.
Don't take it personally.
I'll take a motion on E. Did you want to talk to that, Joe?
If it's what I think it is, I would like to take a moment.
Yep.
Yes. Yes, thank you. So you'll see in your packet, I am thrilled to present to you for your affirmation the appointment of Betty Clark McClay as our treasurer collector. As you can see there, the assistant town administrator and finance director met with the two applicants that we had that were qualified. They then recommended Ms. Clark McClay to me as a finalist, and I was thrilled to meet her, and my memo doesn't really do it justice when we talk about the fact that she's been a treasurer collector both in cities and towns in the Commonwealth, and her extensive time working as an implementation specialist. What that really means is that company is Tyler Technologies, the parent company of Munis, and Munis is our fund accounting software. Additionally, her time in the private sector banking industry was selling services to public sectors. You may be aware of Unibank. We use them for online payments and things of that nature. So not only are we getting a seasoned and experienced treasurer collector, but we have one who's been on the inside for two of the most important applications or services that a treasurer collector could work on, being our fund accounting and our online payments. So I am absolutely thrilled, and if it's a firm, she's looking to start, I believe, March 8th.
Great. She sounds wonderful. I'll take a motion on that.
We have a difference in the opinion about affirm, confirm, but I would move that we affirm the appointment of Betty Clark McClay as the treasurer collector.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yep.
Yes?
I did avail myself of the opportunity to go in and look at the entire folder of everybody who applied, and I appreciate the opportunity because it was everybody. It was, saw what their resumes looked like, saw what the people who were chosen to be interviewed looked like, and she's clearly head and shoulders above everybody else who applied.
Great. Anyone else? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, Joe? I'll take a motion on F.
Sure. I move to accept the proclamation submitted by Josh Winston and announce the month of June will be named Pride Month.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to, because I think Josh has hit the nail on the head here. This is not about groups or about pride for a particular organization. This is about Harwich Pride, and I commend him for the idea. It's really, the way it's written is really nice, and it recognizes that everybody should be proud of Harwich, and it's not just restricted to that in my mind, because we do have a long history of being inclusive for everyone.
I had a nice discussion with him as well. I agree. It's very well written.
Mhm.
Anyone else? All in favor?
Aye.
4-0, Joe?
Thank you.
I'll take a motion on G.
Move that we approve a one-day wine and malt special permit for Cranberry Festival Music Concert at 204 Sisson Road on March 18th, 2023, from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, Joe?
Since I'm a stickler on the pronunciation, I will move that we approve a 2023 annual common Vittler's license renewal for Cape Side Kitchen Incorporated, DBA Cape Side Kitchen, 537 Route 28.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
4-0, Joe?
Thank you.
Aye.
Maybe Joe, you can explain aye to us.
Thank you. So Habitat for Humanity made the town aware by contacting our housing advocate, Brianna Nickerson, that this particular property at 9 Gomes Road is up for sale by the owner. And so that triggers actions by both Habitat for Humanity as well as the town through the Board of Selectmen. So what you have in your packet is the recommended motion whereby the town says that you waive its right to purchase the property because the town was not contemplating this, and further that you waive your right to locate an eligible purchaser, because Habitat for Humanity and then the town have the right of either first refusal to purchase or to find another seller. Our rights are still being upheld because when the transaction is complete, it still enjoys a permanent affordable restriction, so it remains in our inventory. So I would recommend the motion as presented.
And we have done this before. All of the properties are located in Gomes Way, and anything that Habitat builds has the same conditions, that we have to waive our right of first refusal, but it keeps it as an affordable restriction at the Registry of Deeds. With that, I'm going to move that the Board of Selectmen vote to waive its right to purchase the property owned by Karen Tromp, located at 9 Gomes Road, Harwich, Massachusetts. Said right created under affordable housing restriction recorded with the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds in Book 24-172, page 296. I further move that the board vote to waive its right to locate an eligible purchaser under said affordable housing restriction.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, Joe?
Thank you.
On to J.
Do you want me to read it?
I have it, okay.
Oh, no,
Uh,
go ahead.
I move we approve the temporary closure of WFS Restaurant Group, known as Red River Barbecue at 787 Route 28. Did
Second.
I say temporary? I think I did, but
I think you did.
I think you said temporary. Did he?
Any discussion? Don?
I don't like operating on rumor, but I thought I saw a sign at one point that he was trying to sell it. Is this temporary? For sure? I mean, the request is
We
for,
can always go by the handwritten letter in the
Yeah.
packet.
okay.
I was interested in the same thing, Don, but I'm taking his face value of the letter.
If I may,
Yes?
yes, this is just sick clean vacation. He still owns it, and he's working with someone that's going to be managing it with him, so everything's fine.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
4-0, Joe?
Thank you.
We're on to old business, update on opioid funding and vote to accept the present plan.
So, Madam Chair, we do have joining us remotely Dr. Katie O'Neill, our health director, who has been working with others on staff and in the community. You also have in the packet information from our finance director, town accountant, as was requested, I believe, at your last meeting, regarding the recommendations for the use of the opioid funding as outlined.
So since we've already heard their presentation, and Anne Marie has confirmed that the proposed funding is in keeping with requirements, does anybody need further discussion, or should we just entertain a motion? Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to give one final pitch, and Sheila knows what it's for, that they reconsider the begin age for some of their educational efforts. I don't want kids getting educated after they've already dabbled in it. They really need to be educated running up to what the prospects are if they do get involved with it. So it doesn't have to be codified, but you know, please make sure you include younger kids, because it would be naive of anyone out there watching to think that, well, my kid's 12, so they're not part of this.
Katie?
May I respond, Madam Chair?
Yes, Katie, please.
Thank you. Katie O'Neill, Health Director. So we did follow up with the school, and the program that they're asking for would start in 6th grade.
Thank you very much.
That's not included in the memo, but we did mention at the last meeting that we would like to include those programs if possible as well.
So that's 11 years old.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Any other discussion? I'll take a motion to accept the presented plan.
I move that we accept and move forward on implementing the proposed plan for opioid-related services.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0, Joe?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Katie.
Thanks, Katie.
Take a motion on B, the Human Services grants.
I move that we vote to approve the request for proposal document for the fiscal year 2024 Human Services grants.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have to recuse myself.
You have to recuse yourself?
I submit one for site law services. I can't be involved with anything that
Oh,
relates to.
I submit one.
Oh, jeez.
Well, then we have a,
We have a situation.
Is there a
But we
deadline?
don't. We have a parliamentary response to
I know you have one.
So the rule of necessity would indicate that if a majority or all but, say, one of you had to recuse themselves, that one person could still vote it, because it still represents a quorum, and the rule of necessity allows the matter to continue on, because without that rule, the business of the town could not get done.
Okay. Can you put that in English? Don and I can both vote?
We have both disclosed that we have a potential conflict.
Right.
But
Okay.
if you felt strongly enough and you recused yourself, then there was only one member left, the matter could still go forward.
I'm okay with this because it's not deciding the money.
I was just going to say, it's just the pool, and it's not the allocation of it.
Right, right. Okay. We'll take a motion then.
Okay, I move we approve the,
You have a motion.
We had a motion.
You have a
Oh, we
motion,
already
a
had it?
motion and a second.
Okay, thank you.
Simply would be the vote.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's 4-0, Joe.
Thank you.
And C, I'm
So,
guessing
Madam
this is
Chair, on this
you.
one, if I could, I
Yes?
think there's been some confusion. Staff was not sure if there was going to be a substantive discussion on what the Director of Planning and Community Development's working on, and rather, was it going to be a report out from the meeting last week that one of the members attended? Because we do have the planner scheduled to come before you next Monday to go through the zoning bylaw amendments.
Okay,
Sure, so I could, this allows me to mention.
Correct. You
Okay.
could speak about whatever you wanted. We just wanted to explain why
Yeah.
the director's not here.
Yeah.
And the packet materials is more relevant to your discussion next week.
So, I'm just gonna speak to the one. So I went to the planning board meeting last week. God, it seems like weeks ago. But they were talking about it was a discussion on zoning, and one thing was that we were talking about dealing with changing our bylaw to make ADUs easier. And so there was some info provided by our planner, Paul, and I actually proposed that we actually even simplify that ADU bylaw language to be such that he was bringing it down to 10,000 square feet in any district. But, you know, we have properties in the campgrounds, for instance, that may even have less than that. So rather than that, to oversimplify it to say that anybody could apply. Of course, you have to meet the other various parameters. You know, you need to provide parking, you need to meet the setbacks, et cetera. And, you know, the only other thing I was saying was, and I made it clear that I wasn't speaking on behalf of the board, but that I knew that we all had an interest in addressing this situation. So the other thing is currently we have, 900 square feet. You know, it could go to 1,000 just to simplify it. We also have in our zoning bylaws, 50% of the size of the square footage of the house, the dwelling that you're doing this in. I mean, that really is kind of silly language in the sense that if I have a larger house than you have, I can have a bigger ADU. Well, why? I mean, that was all in proportion, but that kind of sets us in a way of judging things and complicating it, really. So I was looking for language that would simplify it. So that was really the discussion that I had with the planning board. They seem to be very much in favor of the same thing, is, they're looking to be able to have people come to them. Currently, they're having to turn people away if they don't have the required square footage. So we need to overhaul that piece of the ADU bylaw. The other thing I just want to mention was that workforce housing. We should look to see, I happen to be looking at zoning regs in Eastham, and they have a definition of workforce housing in their zoning bylaw, so we should add that. It would help us.
Yeah.
So those are just a couple of things that we talked about, so.
Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And in support of what Julie said, I served on the planning board in the 90s. It's been that way. I mean, at that point, it was even more absurd. You had to share a common wall, and it was like absurdly complex. I mean, to me, I don't know what the interest of society would be in whether you have 3 bathrooms that are all used by you in one main house, or you have 2 bathrooms that are used in the main house and 1 that's being used in an accessory dwelling unit, because it's driven by how many bathrooms you have in Title V, and I'm pretty sure that we're going to be doing something analogous with the sewer areas. So why would it matter? Because your total load on the property is really pretty much what it always was.
Right. Actually, and to that point, just to clarify, it's to the bedrooms, how many bedrooms. You can have 8,000 bathrooms as long as you have your 1 or 2 or 3 bedrooms that you're allowed, whatever you're allowed per your septic system based on the square footage of your lot. And Dawn's right. I mean, you could have a ton of bathrooms in 1 bedroom. It doesn't really matter. As long as you're not going over what your required septic load is and what your capability is. And we're not looking to add bedrooms. This is all about reorganizing where the bedrooms are. Nobody's getting an extra bedroom.
And we'd have to look ourselves in the mirror if we didn't wind up doing this, because the other side of the ledger sheet here is we have an explosion of Airbnbs, and it seriously doesn't matter even how many bedrooms you have, because you get 15 people that are sharing the load of like $1,000 a night. So it really boils down to the flushes, because they're coming into the place, they're using it to the maximum extent possible. Nobody ever contemplated that happening.
I just want to thank Julie for attending the planning board meeting
Yeah.
Yes.
and making that pitch, because I agree with everything you said. If we're serious about this, which I think we are, we need to make it as simple as we can.
Yep. Agreed. Okay, so we're going to bring that back, Joe? Is that correct?
Yes,
Next-
you're going to have a more
next
substantive discussion
With Paul?
and a presentation by the director on Monday.
Okay.
And that's ahead of the public hearing that's scheduled for Tuesday, the 28th, on the same
What
topic.
time is that hearing?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm going to say that it's probably no earlier than 6 PM,
Okay.
but I can look.
I think it's 6:30, isn't it?
Yeah, planning board is
6:30.
6:30, yeah.
Thanks.
Checking my
Technically, I'm
calendar.
still right. Ish.
Yeah, it is 6:30.
I think we're on to...
I suspect we're going to wind up having a number of us there. Do we want to cross-post?
Oh,
So, yeah, we should. That's a good point.
Because that way you don't have to get into this discussion. I'm only speaking for myself, even though Larry's sitting next to me over here.
yeah, I had
Yeah.
hoped to go. Can we do
We have
that,
enough
post
time?
that,
Let's cross-post.
We do.
so we can all go?
Yeah.
I think we're on to contracts. Can I get a motion on A?
Move that we accept and authorize the chair to sign the Massachusetts Cultural Council grant in the amount of $7,800.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0, Joe?
Thank you.
I move that we
B?
approve the Massachusetts Cultural Council District Improvement Grant for Harwich Port in the amount of $15,000.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 4-0, Joe?
Thank you.
C, I move that we approve the Massachusetts Cultural Council District Improvement Grant for Harwich, Center in the amount of $15,000.
Second.
Any discussion?
Woo-hoo for all three.
All in favor?
Aye.
4-0, Joe?
Thank you.
D, I move that we approve the Campbell Construction Group LLC change order 1 for the Brooks Academy Museum basement renovation in the amount of $8,798.
Second.
Any discussion? I just had a question. Is that falling under the contingency amount, Joe?
We're still under the 25% rule under the 3039M.
Okay, so that's still within our
Correct.
contingency. Thank you.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0. Town Administrator's Report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, again, thrilled to be able to announce hirings. First one is Ms. Stephanie Johnson. She'll be joining us as an executive assistant in the Health Department. You may recall a few months ago, I announced the appointment of another Eldridge, unrelated. Unfortunately, Ms. Eldridge had to vacate her position regarding family matters and issues that she wanted to tend to. So we thank her for her service, and we're thrilled to have Ms. Stephanie Johnson join us. And again, she'll be the executive assistant in the Health Department. And to also announce the hiring of Mr. Andrew Walsh, who is joining us as a custodian in the Department of Public Works. So great to have these folks coming on board. Other than that, nothing else to report. Thank you.
Okay. Selectmen's reports? Julie?
No, I talked about the planning board hearing, and that's about it.
Okay. Don?
Had a very boring week.
Larry?
I have nothing, thank you.
Well, I have a report. I was at Disney, and that was a very exciting week. How's that?
Sweet.
That's
You didn't invite us.
I thought of you all, though. You know, when I was talking to people like Goofy and Pluto.
Yeah. Thank you.
My favorite is Bear Country, by the way.
I like that,
In-
too.
In the community center, you forgot to say Donald Duck.
Yeah, yeah. I think I should take a motion to
Okay,
adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
4-0.
I think I want to go hunt for the ducks.
What's
You
that?
do
I
what?
want to go duck
I
hunting.
want to go over and vote for the Ducks.
That's, you know, that,